right, ladies and gentlemen, it's the witching hour of 7:10. I'd like to call this city council meeting for November 4th to order this evening. The mayor is not feeling well and is not here with us tonight, but I expect him back next time. And Andy is traveling and excused. With that, I think our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mariah, will you lead us? Our first item of business is communications from the public. This is communications from the public on any matter that's not a public hearing this evening. And with that said, I'll open the public comment period. Anybody wish to speak to the council? Anybody online? Not seeing any. Next item on our agenda is communications from volunteer boards. I understand we have the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau providing an update.
Good evening. Mariah Jose. Do I do my address since I'm on the board too? Okay. Board chair of Explore Whitefish and owner of Nelson Hardware. Just like to make sure that I'm doing the things appropriately. So I'm here tonight to give you guys an update on our winter media buy. And in your board packets, originally when you had approved our strategic plan in March, we had identified some winter target markets for our fly-in traffic, and those were Seattle, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Chicago, and Portland. And as we were coming forward to do our media buys for this coming season, we found that we needed to do some changes to those markets based on some data that was coming forward to us. And so, yes, we are swapping out Portland for Dallas. And we do not take this decision lightly to switch the target markets, and we have not completed that buy yet for the Dallas market because we felt it was really important to come to you, the board, have the board come to you, the council, and be really transparent with where we are putting our message out. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or I have Julie here to talk over any of the data that we have that we brought forward and found the reason for this change.
Any questions? Go right ahead.
Yeah, could you explain it? Because it seems a little funny to go from Portland, which has similar Northwest lifestyle, kind of values, et cetera, that we want to be bringing people from there. Why are you changing to Dallas?
So there's a couple of reasons. First of all, if we look at some of the data, and Julie, you have some of this was presented to you as well. So if you want to, I'm going to let Julie talk about the actual data, but we can tag team on this.
Yep. As we've found over the last 2 years, Portland hasn't been coming during the winter season as much. There's actually 13 ski resorts between here and Oregon, and with the lack of direct flights coming from Portland, we have seen a downturn in visitors from Portland, and we are starting to see an increase in the number of folks coming from the Texas market. Some of our partners, and they have asked to remain confidential, but I think we know who some of our partners are, provided us some statistics. One being actually a hotel partner provided that Dallas ranked 10th in the market of the highest in lodging spend, and then and that was in the season of 22-23, and in 23-24 it was 8th. Portland wasn't even in their top 20, and then I want to make sure I get this right. In the highest number of visits, Dallas ranked 12th in 22-23 season, 10th in 23-24 season, and Portland was not in the top 15. And then another member I want to be able to pull this up, because this was, here we go right here. Dallas consistently ranks as a top origin city for visitors to Whitefish, positioning it as a valuable market for tourism, and that was provided by Zartico. At the ski resort, which I will share, Dallas was the 4th largest market in visitor spend, where Portland was number 9. And that data source was actually through Whitefish Mountain Resort, as well as through Visa Destination Insights. During the winter 23-24 season, our website analytics through Explore Whitefish consistently posted Dallas as one of the top user groups. It represents just under 2% of our overall, and Portland from user groups on our website was less than 0.4%. So we're just starting to see we're losing some market share from the Portland market, which I believe is directly linked to the flight availability, where Dallas is starting to perform as a growth market and a greater visitor origin market. I do have some additional, I'm sorry I didn't have it like more organized here. But there was some additional information that I held on to. From Whitefish Mountain Resort, here it is, Oregon was number 20 on their website. And Oregon, excuse me, I apologize for this. This was a little disorganized. Whitefish Mountain Resort reported that they had 385 individual guests transact at the resort from Oregon, and they actually had over 1,400 coming from Texas. So that was the other example. We're starting to see more availability and more spending, more interest out of that market.
Any other questions for you, Beth?
So if we're already getting people from the Dallas market, I mean, I don't know how this works, but what are the goals of what you're trying to do? Because it sounds like there's 2 businesses that really want
So
to have Dallas people come because they're more reliable now than
So our
Portland.
marketing committee made this recommendation. We have 5 different vendors that are part of our marketing committee. And really, they do look at the various data that's collected both from Zartico, which is a cell phone-based data service, as well as Visa Destination Insights, which is a spend. And then they look at their own analytics as to who's actually spending in the hotels, who's actually buying and spending on the mountain, et cetera. And what we're really trying to get from this is these individuals are in the markets that they're seeing a growth in visitor origin. We have identified that it would be best, and we had an extensive conversation around this, that instead of having some of our for-profit members representing the destination in a market that's already starting to develop and come to this destination, that we, Explore Whitefish, would like to make sure that we continue to target those individuals so that we are putting messaging out around high value, low impact visitors, meaning really targeting guests that will come to a small mountain community, respect our community, our fragile environment, and recreate responsibly when they're here, rather than it just being marketing messages being sent out extensively by other corporations or outside interests.
Yeah, go ahead, Shazam.
It's just to make sure, and thank you for the report. I read every month your newsletter and your reports. Just to make sure, am I correct that this board is informing the council about this mini change in priority? You do not need our permission to do so, because those are your members' funds, and you can do it because you have to respond to your members. Am I correct?
Yes, there is a portion of that, and we also chose to make sure that we are being really transparent with you, because this is information that we presented to you before. This money, actually, the board chose to not actually outlay any of this spend until we had come before you, because we felt it was really important to maintain the relationship and transparency with you. These particular funds, I believe, are all private, and so would be out of that budget, but we still felt that for integrity purposes, it was important to talk with you first.
Steve, any comment?
And I'd love to add, just in a perfect world, we would be able to have enough funds in a shoulder season to be able to market to all potential growth markets in order to build our level of tourism to the place where our local businesses are thriving a little bit better than what we see in the winter months, but we just don't have those kind of pockets.
My only question is there any sort of cross-reference data between what you just said about recreating responsibly and where people come from? Do we have any sort of nexus where we analyze any of that information, that certain people who come here from different areas have a different level of experience or expectation, or after they've come? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, all we really have is what they do when they're in town, and that's, from a visitor behavior standpoint. And during the winter, it is heavily based in snow recreation. It's heavily based in skiing. And the more information that we can push out about recreating responsibly and actually being a visitor in a small mountain town that's made up of, we're a community where people live and work. We're not necessarily a resort town. The more information that we can push out about this is a very special place to visit, I think the better we are at managing visitor behavior. But if we're not in a market with that kind of messaging, we don't have any responsibility as to what is the message and what's being pushed out.
So is that more of the flavor of why you want to push this, change your
it-
priority from?
It really is. And it's also, if this is a growth area, because in the winter, we really do need to build some visitation. We've actually, the last 2 seasons, we've actually really suffered in the way of hotel occupancy, as well as we've seen a downturn in visitor spending. So if this is a visitor origin market where we can make an impact, and again, our paid media spends are incredibly small in comparison to other ski communities that we consider in our comp set. We're just hoping to get some responsible messaging and our messaging that we push out in the hands of the people that are coming.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Any other comments from council? On a personal note, it being a Dallasite at one time in my life, I don't know enough about marketing, although that's what I did as a lawyer for many years, and you're talking to the people that are coming here anyway, and I guess that's probably a good thing. So anyway, I appreciate, and I think everybody here appreciates the WCVB's coming here and telling us and informing us what you're doing and why you're doing it, and making it. We are not asking for permission, but I like the idea that you do let us know what's going on. So thanks so much. All right, next on our agenda, is there any further, no, we've already done public communications, we've got volunteer boards. Are any other volunteer boards in the audience or on council? Any reports, volunteer boards? Not seeing any. I think we'll move on to our consent agenda. I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
Move that we approve the consent agenda, and it's one item.
I'll second it.
Moved in second. Any corrections or notations that anybody wants to make? All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign, and the matter passes unanimously. Next up are our public hearings. First public hearing is our ordinance 24-12, an ordinance amending the Resort Tax Administration ordinance codifying Title III, Chapter 3 of the City Code. And here we go.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and City Council. On November 7th, 2023, about a year ago, voters approved the ballot measure for resort tax to change the use to include community housing. And that passed by an approval rate of 83%. So now that we have the voter-approved uses, we have to update our code in relation to that. It's important to note that Montana Code allows the city to update the administrative ordinance, which we have codified in Title 3, Chapter 3 of our Whitefish City Code, at any time to effectively administer resort tax. So there's a few things that the proposed ordinance does. One, it documents the recent elections that have taken place related to resort tax, and it enacts the voters' approved uses, which include 25% for property tax relief, 48% for repair, maintenance, and improvements of streets, 10% for community housing initiatives and development of deed-restricted housing, 10% for bicycle and pedestrian paths and other park acquisitions, capital improvements, and equipment, 2% for the Whitefish Trail, and then 5% that is retained by merchants for their cost of administration. It also extends the resort tax to January 31st of 2045, which is approved by voters. The effective date of this ordinance, we have this as the first reading. It'll go through a second reading, but the effective date is actually set for February 1st of 2025 when this language comes into effect. Other items within this ordinance update, because we are really updating the entire chapter, the administrative ordinance, includes updates to goods and services that are subject to an exempt from resort tax that is based on interpretations by the city manager since July of 2011, so myself as well as former city managers. And that's in accordance with our current Whitefish City codes, in which interpretations must be documented and are a responsibility of the city manager. Within the ordinance, you'll see a red line version that includes all of the changes. There are additions based on interpretations. There's one minor just moving taxable items to the section that it should really fall under for clarity. And then also amends some of the exemptions as well based on the interpretations. The Resort Tax Monitoring Committee has reviewed this ordinance, and there was some discussion, and I wish Andy was here because he could also share his experience there, but there was some discussion about boats because that has been included. But they were supportive of keeping it as a taxable item. There was discussion of, do you tax the first 25,000 or the after 25,000, but in the end, they decided to keep it clear as boats being taxable regardless of price. And that was an interpretation that was done that I actually did and confirmed with our former city manager, Charles Stearns, in that when we have let me just one more second. We already have for taxability jet skis, snowmobiles, that it would fall under that same type of use. So let's see here. So if you have any question about those, I'm happy to answer them. We also are in here revising the applicable penalties for failure to remit or report resort taxes. Staff did take some time and researched what other penalties and late fees communities have that have resort tax or areas and districts. And we are the only community that I've found that has no penalty or late fee. We have an interest rate if you haven't paid your taxes, which is very low and doesn't encourage individuals to pay timely. But in looking at what other communities are doing, there's anywhere from $30 per month late fee, all the way up to $250 if you're 30 days late, plus, and then if you go another 30 days, it's $500 late fee. So it's very important to know that this resort tax is collected from the customers, and then we are letting the merchants keep 5% to administer this, and so we're expecting that they remit the 95% of what they collected timely to the city. So our proposed changes here includes a 30-day grace period. So your resort tax is due on the 20th of the month following collection. We'll give you an additional 30-day grace period, at which point, if you have not paid, then a $50 late fee would be assessed. And then for each month after that, it would be $100 for a late fee. The proposed ordinance does also remove the revocation of a city business license as a penalty, because during the last legislative session, we did update our former business license program to be a business registration program, which is to really just be able to track what businesses we have, make sure that they're safe with fire inspections, but there's really not a license that we revoke anymore. So that has been removed. We also have provided just some minor clarifications and grammar corrections, and then removed the gender-specific references since I'm not a he. So just to make it more clean. We also defined in there audits. It's been an interpretation that the audit that could be performed is by an external public accounting firm. However, when we run into situations with a business that all of a sudden has reported something that looks odd, staff really is auditing their records. And so I think it's very important to save taxpayers the cost of our extremely high audit prices with our public accounting firm, so that staff can do that internally. We've done it where a business has come forward and said, hey, I didn't implement the extra 1%, so then they provided records and we've essentially done what they do in an audit. So I just want it very clear moving forward. We did present these changes to the Resort Tax Monitoring Committee at its September 18th meeting, as I mentioned, and after a thorough review and discussion, they voted unanimously to recommend the City Council approve the proposed revisions. The ordinance is administrative in nature and does not incur any direct costs for the city. The new late fees are expected to help with timely reporting and remitting of resort tax, but are not intended to, nor are they expected to generate a significant amount of revenue. Staff respectfully recommends the City Council adopt the proposed ordinance, amending the resort tax administrative ordinance. And you can read that rest of it because it's a long title. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Dana, thank you. Just a couple, and they're not substantial. You're doing a little bit of housekeeping while you're proposing these amendments. Under 3-3-8, which is the use of tax money, all the paras from A to E obviously are defining the pie chart that comes out of that 3%. Now, we have already mentioned that 3%, it's the resort tax, just for simplicity, in case that goes to 3.5, we don't have to change it again. How about we eliminate every paragraphs of the 3%, and we say of the resort tax revenue? That's number one. And number two is, I know that after you take out all the monies that are entitled to every topic here, we're left with 25%, which is the 25% we rebate to the property owners in their tax bill. At the same time, we have been rebating more than 25% because of how the budget process and the accountability of the resort tax works. So how about we say in comma A, property tax reduction for taxpayers residing in the city. I don't know that we should say residing in the city, by the way, because taxpayer, 33% of them do not reside in the city. In the amount at least of 25% or 25% or and above. So we're not caught into semantics later. And legalities, because taxpayers residing in the city means that we wouldn't be rebating it to the people who own properties but do not reside in the city.
Giuseppe, that point is well taken, and that residing in the city should be strucken. The state law requires that any amount not collected or not any amounts collected that are not used within the fiscal year must be remitted back to the taxpayers. So I don't think we can change the language in this code. I think it comes down to how we're budgeting, because what we're and I think the word is not used, it's what is not committed or something like that. So I think that one, I would not recommend changing that, but I do recommend removing that residing in the city. Thank you for catching that. And then the other recommendation that you had of removing the 3% from each section, we could add that up in the paragraph above. This is just the language that we've always had, but we are limited to 3%. We cannot go higher than 3%. There is an additional 1% resort tax that other areas, communities, and districts can do, but you had to have a population under the threshold at the time of adopting that 1%. So that the legislature specifically left out Whitefish for that 1%.
Yep, Dana, I'm looking at under E, it says file remit, a business that fails to file or fails to remit resort taxes when due. So we recently had in the paper someone that had not paid resort taxes for 11 years. They got a CUP for a bed and breakfast, and then we never got any resort tax payments. But I found out after talking to you and that they were supposed to be also submitting a monthly form saying that zero amount of money was received. So in this section, though, should we change it to say a business that fails to file a reporting form? I don't know how they, is that electronic or do they actually fill out a form that lets us track them? Because we as a city didn't know for 11 years that they were not collecting, or we didn't know what was really going on, I guess. But where would we put something about that report that's required every month, even if someone doesn't have any income coming through? Is that?
So that was the intention of the language, failing to file, but you could change that to a business that fails to file
A monthly?
report, or I would say, I would actually remove the word file and say a business that fails to report taxes due.
On
Or
a monthly
fails to remit
on a
resort
monthly basis?
It's already required that it's monthly within this code. And so the only exception to that is if they contact and get a waiver by the city manager. If they have under $5 due per month, they can create a payment or a reporting plan, I should say.
Okay, I just feel like it needs to be clearly delineated that people are required to actually let us know how much they've brought in or not brought in. So do you want to just eliminate to file or add a reporting form, or?
Yeah, so I would say a business that fails to report taxes due or fails to remit resort taxes under E.
With appropriate documentation?
No, I think we already have the documentation that is
Okay.
required. I don't think, we wouldn't be able to audit every time somebody submits something, so just the reporting form that we have, that would suffice at this point.
All right, and then in the future, if that happens where people don't report monthly, what's our follow-up for compliance?
So we are, I think we now have staff that is working in, related to short-term rentals is probably the ones that come up the most, because they either aren't, they aren't operating at the time, so they don't know that they're supposed to be reporting. But when this code is updated, we will send out notice to all of the businesses in our business registration program. I think it'll be important to send them to all, even those that might not have resort tax, they might not think they have resort tax eligible items, because some might have changed their operations where they're selling retail of some type too. So we will get that information out, and then they'll be notified of the requirements and the penalties that are new. And then we'll be, what I've asked, or we'll ask, I know we've done it before, but we have to do it again, is confirming that our business registration, that those that could be subject to resort tax, like short-term rentals, should be within that resort tax module. And so those would be easily tracked. But I think we're doing a really good job in general. Obviously, there's a few that have been missed over time, but staff is diligently working to improve the collection of resort tax.
Yeah, I'm glad we've got staff for it now. And the second thing is, I talked to Dana about this. Dana has the authority to take things and put things on, change things around in the, what is a necessity or a luxury. And I would like to put pet food as not a luxury, but have it not be taxed. So she wanted me to bring it up to council because she can do that on her own as a city manager, but she wanted me to discuss it with you guys.
Yeah, so, and just to clarify, Rebecca, it's, the reason I asked for the council to consider this is that it was a previous city manager that made the interpretation that pets and pet supplies, so let me clarify. In 1995, pets and pet supplies were taxable. In the 2011 update, pet food was added to pets, pet supplies, and then it became pet food. So the interpretation was that pet supplies also included pet food. So if you feel that pet food is not the same as pet supplies, council does have the authority to review the interpretations of their city managers.
I guess all these merchants will need to program their POS machines to exclude or include pet food. If the council is on an agreement and it's something implementable, I have no problem to call pet food exempt from resort tax unless it's caviar.
Rosie doesn't eat caviar. Yeah.
We're here to tax people's pet food either.
Great, so you guys are okay with that? Good,
I think there's concurrence here.
okay, thank
Dana, you
you.
good with that?
Yeah, I will update the ordinance to reflect that change for your second reading, to remove pet food from the taxable list. What I would probably recommend is we put it down under exempt. Since we have pet and pet supplies up top, under exemption, we'll add pet food.
And
Thank you, I think it would help the locals. Thank you.
only because I'm interested. Do we include chicken feed, and to the extent it's even available in the city, and or horse feed or anything else? I mean, do we agricultural feed? Do we want to broaden it that way? I'm being serious, but I'm not.
You could say pet food and livestock feed. I don't
Yeah, what else?
know. Animal food. I don't know whatever you think is clear. The clearest. Let me think on the spot.
Do we have a company that pays resort tax that sells livestock feed?
We don't right now, but you
Actually,
could, because we'd have birds and pets. So like
the Western Building did at one time.
yeah,
They're not- yeah.
I would
pet
say,
and livestock
I mean,
feed.
okay.
If you'd like.
Like
it
I said,
to
I'm.
read that way.
To me, a horse is a luxury item. I'm sorry, I don't agree.
You
I'm
cannot,
serious there.
you cannot discriminate
I
on
think it would be
animals.
better if it were bagged or canned pet food, just to keep it to the things that you can buy at the grocery store. I think that's what Rebecca is referring to more than
Fine,
livestock.
I'm happy to classify my horses as pets.
I think we're-
There you go.
I'm okay with livestock
hopefully you're
feed
not
being
riding
on
them
there.
anymore.
I think it's, pets are family too, so I'm okay with livestock feed being on there, even if it's rare, but.
It's an agricultural item. I don't think it's subject to the resort tax in any case. Agricultural products like that are not subject to the resort tax. So I belay that order or that suggestion. Any other questions? Ben?
Just one, Dana. I just want to extend Giuseppe's questioning earlier about how we handle the excess resort tax. And just so I understand correctly, you're saying y'all's interpretation is that we can't change that mechanism in this ordinance.
Correct. I can pull up the state law if you give me one sec, but there is a state law that states what you have to do. Give me one, computer shut off.
My next question is going to be, is there something we can change short of a ballot initiative if this council did not want it to operate in that manner, because I can see the benefits of changing that personally.
I'm sorry, I can't research and listen at the same time. What was that?
No, this may not be a question you can answer right now, but I think in principle, I agree with where Giuseppe was going with this. In my head, there's some value to having consistency of property taxes for the residents over time, and when their property taxes go up and they go down based on our resort collections, it's, I don't know, it just seems less clean. So in my mind, if there was a way to change the way the math works so that any excess resort tax funds go somewhere else, I think that's something I would like to consider, and I don't know if there's any way to do that. So that was my question.
Yeah, I found the code, 7/6/1507. A resort community that received more resort tax revenues than had been included in the budget shall establish a property tax relief fund. All resort tax revenues received in excess of the budget amount must be placed in the fund. The entire fund must be used to replace property taxes. This is in addition to the 5%. So it does come down to how we budget, not necessarily this code section. I will say the additional property tax relief, there's two factors that have played into it. One is the Haskell Basin bond. That will be gone at the end of this year, essentially. And so we won't have that excess that was collected for the bond that's been going back. The other factor, what we saw over the past 2 years, was just inflation in general, like incredibly affected our resort tax. It has not done that in the past 30 years now. So I don't think, we can budget a little bit differently, but I also think that the market will actually take care of that anyways, in general. So it's hard because if you're budgeting expenditures, we have capital plans that say we need this much for streets. You could easily budget for more projects, for those items and for others, but you're still guessing on what your revenue is going to come in at. And we've always budgeted for the revenue that we collected last year. And I think that that was an interpretation done before, and I don't think that's necessarily accurate, but at the same time, how do you budget revenue and not know you're going to get it? Well, you assume you're going to at least get what you had last year. I think we've seen consistent growth in resort tax, so we could, make an assumption that it's 3 to 5% every year. And so that would accomplish reducing that additional property tax relief. But the Haskell Basin bond will, when that's done, will also help. And that's part of the bond language, so we had to do that property tax relief. That was voted on by the voters.
And those are all great points. And I think it's hard. I know, like last year we've been very diligent about keeping taxes consistent over time, but we had to raise taxes, and part of the reason was just because resort tax collections were lower. And I think it'd be nice to not have to deal with that all the time. And so, maybe if you could just help us remember when we're doing budgeting next time to reconsider that particular point.
Yep, absolutely.
Dana, I have a couple of questions. Number one is, are the penalties, the penalties that you put in place on this for failure to file or failure to remit, are they going to cover essentially our cost of collection?
Yes, essentially. It's going to depend on how far out they are. Obviously, we'll get to eventually a civil complaint, and then that's where the costs really escalate because of the time of our attorney. But they'll go to the court, and then there's rules on how much you can actually collect over the amount of resort tax that's due. It's, I think, 50%.
Okay.
And that's state law. But yes, these really cover the cost of our staff monitoring, mailing notices, postage, and I do feel like $50 is reasonable. Some of the other higher penalty communities, I think they're pretty high late fee. When you look at what our late fee is for water and sewer service, I kind of compared that, and $50 is where we land at for like shut-off service.
Okay. And then the second item, and you may be comfortable with it, I just want you to tell me that you are. I, like Rebecca, want to make it crystal clear that if you've got a CUP to run a short-term rental, you're required to file even a zero report every month. I think we just need to have that.
That is regardless of how the entity is operating, they are under a CUP, PD, whatever it might be, they are required to report zeros, even if their
Okay, and that's clear.
activity's been zero. Yes, yep, there's no exemption to $0, zero filing.
Okay, thank you, that's all I had.
Yep.
I think we published or set this up for a public comment, for a public hearing. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Anybody have any comments? Any comments online? Not seeing it, I'll turn it back to council for a motion.
I would move to approve ordinance 24-12, amending the resort tax administrative ordinance as presented, with the one adjustment to the pet food.
There were a couple places where we changed the language, but Dana
Oh.
has that covered, I think.
Would you like me to say
Read
them
it.
for you?
Sure.
Read it
Okay.
into the record.
Pet food is being eliminated to become exempt, and it will be pet and livestock feed. And then under section 3-3-8, letter A, we'll remove residing in the city. And then on 3-3-12E, we will remove, it will state a business that fails to report taxes due and strike file.
My motion would be to approve with those corrections.
Okay, seconded by Councilor Norton. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. The matter passes unanimously. On to our second hearing this evening, which would be our ordinance 24-13, an ordinance amending the zoning regulations, Title 11, Section 11-5, sign regulations. Dave.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. Periodically that we have changes to our different sections of code when we find discrepancies or other things that need to be changed, and so we bring forward some housekeeping things to you. This particular code amendment is in relation to bulletin boards, flag clearances, ground-mounted sign vision triangles, sidewalk A-frame signs, and park monument signs. So we'll start with the bulletin boards. Currently, our code enforcement guys have been battling people sticking up posters for different events on the pillars on Central Avenue and other places around town, stapling the buildings, things like that. It's illegal under the city code to post flyers on public property. And so we came up with the idea that if we talked about bulletin boards in the sign code and made them exempt, they would provide an additional area for people to be able to put those things so they wouldn't be put on public property in other areas. Currently, we don't talk about bulletin boards at all in the code. We do allow for 6 square foot menu displays for restaurants and bars and lounges, and those are exempt, but we don't have any dedicated spaces for that. There's a couple of existing bulletin boards downtown that have been there a long time and are grandfathered in. But so this would add the ability to put a 12 square foot bulletin board up outside restaurants, bars, lounges, and grocery stores. The second one had to do with flags. There had been some questions on some flags hanging over the sidewalk. We have certain height restrictions for flags so that they don't, cause a problem with people walking through there or maybe hitting vehicles going by on the street. But there were some questions about how that was measured, and so we added some language in there stating the height clearance is measured from the lowest point of the slack hanging flag to the ground surface. And then we also codified an exception given for flying the flag at street level on major holidays like Veterans Day and things like that. In the clear vision triangle section of the code, and this is one of the ones where there was a major discrepancy in the code. Right now the code states that there needs to be a 40-foot setback for clear vision from any kind of a monument sign for the intersection of the corner lot lines. But the graphic in the sign code shows that as 20 feet. And we also have a definition of the clear vision triangle, what talks about vegetation, and that's 40 feet from the intersection. And so we're just basically changing it to be consistent with our other clear vision triangle section and making it 20 feet from the corner, which is consistent with both the graphic and our landscaping chapter where it talks about that. A-frame signs, those have been something that have been a bit of consternation for the city code enforcement and people that do the sign permits for many years. Mostly because the way our code reads, it says you're allowed one A-frame sign per developed site, but the code doesn't define what a developed site is. And so, you know, it was like, was it the lot? Is it a building? Is it per business? You know, what if there's multiple businesses on a single lot? And we've always kind of enforced that to be basically per storefront entrance, but we haven't, you know, it's not something that's been in the code, so we figured that we should actually codify the way that we've enforced it for the last 10 years. And so in this situation, we go through and basically adding a bunch of additional language on how those things could be set up. And so the way it would be read would be one A-frame level or A-frame sign per storefront entrance. And then we are also adding additional language in there just for safety purposes. It would require a greater clear vision, or I mean clear sidewalk space. Right now it's 44 inches. We'd move that to 4 feet for safety for pedestrians and people with disabilities. We're also requiring those signs to be located within 15 feet of the building entrance and not block access to buildings, steps, or wheelchair ramps. And then we also say that, you know, A-frame signs can't have other attractants on them, such as balloons or flags, and they can't be illuminated or electronic. Currently, the language talks about we don't allow A-frame signs with individually changeable letters, but we have always allowed like dry erase boards or chalkboards. So we clarifying that chalkboards and dry erase boards would be allowed. One thing that's come up over the years, we've had one person with a sign downtown that uses magnetic letters, and they've challenged us whether or not they can use that many times. Those magnetic letters are, you know, much better than the kind that are plastic and slide in that the wind tends to blow away. We did bring this up with the planning board and talked about, you know, whether or not we would allow an exception for magnetic letters, and they just opted to pass that to the council to make that decision, whether we want to change that part of it. But right now, the way the code reads, those magnetic ones would also be banned, as well as the kind with the slide-in plastic letters. So that's something, you guys, if you want to talk about that, we were happy to discuss that later. Then we also added additional language that those signs, those A-frames, can only be allowed out during business hours, and that non-compliant signs can be removed by city staff. And then also we added a liability clause that basically exempts the city, because it's on public property, from any damages if someone were to trip over a sign that was improperly placed or left out at night or things like that. And they're only allowed in the WB3 zone, or that area of the sign district, which is our downtown. But we do, just as a note, we do allow public display of merchandise on downtown on Central Avenue on the sidewalk, as long as there's 6 feet of unobstructed clearance for those types of signs. Parks monument signs has been something that just recently came up. Well, official government signs are exempt from getting a sign permit. They are still required to meet the sign code. And most of our parks are in residentially zoned districts. And those residential zones only allow 1 2-square-foot sign flush mounted on a building, or a freestanding monument sign that's no more than 10 square feet and a maximum of 4 feet high. And right now the code just says that those are for residential subdivisions, apartments, or non-residential conditional uses, but it doesn't talk about public uses. So in this instance, you know, in the past, we've just kind of, well, there's park signs have been there forever, so it's never really come up. But more recently, the Parks and Rec Department, through the Park Board, have been installing brand new signs in all the city parks. And we realized that the signs that they were installing did not meet this requirement. And so we're looking at modifying an allowance for public signs in the residential district to be up to 6 feet high and a maximum square footage of 15 square feet. So that's more or less the requirements of what we're looking to change. We did bring this to the Community Development Board on October 17th. They had one minor friendly amendment where we clarified under the public signs in the residential zone that basically would allow them just a little bit of language in there where it said or public uses to clarify that section, which is what staff recommended that they make that minor change after we noticed it wasn't in there previously. And so looking at the review of the findings, the growth policy does require us to review sign standards and propose amendments periodically. We are doing that. It does help secure from safety and other dangers. Basically requiring more clearance around A-frame signs and other things like that will help with safety. So staff does recommend approval. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
So Dave, you want us to decide about having metallic letters or slide-in letters? We get to decide that even though we don't know anything about it?
I mean, that's something you guys could talk about, whether or not you think that, I provided an example in the staff report that shows what those look like. They're basically, they stick on, there's like metal within the frame of the A-frame sign they stick on there, where the plastic ones slide in a little slot and the wind can blow them out of there. And they're, for whatever reason, over the years, there's been some people in the community that have been very opposed to any kind of signs that have those slide-in letters. We don't allow them anywhere in the city. But those magnetic ones didn't exist until about 5 or 6 years ago, and that's just become kind of a new thing. And so we could, modify that to allow them if you guys thought it was something. I know Harlow has used them, and we've kind of been in a lot of contact with them over the years, of whether that's copacetic or not. But and there's other businesses that have used them as well. But
Your preference is that we allow the metallic, but do not allow the slide-in letters, because
I think that's something worth discussing for sure. It would be a
Yeah.
change in how we look at that, but we could, just be a minor amendment of how this is worded.
Makes sense. Okay, thanks.
Well, watching the Community Development Board, one of the concerns was safety, where some letters would fly around. In the wind, anything can fly around. I have no heartburns either ways about which type of letters we put up. I assume someone could put a sandwich board all black with LED letters that change the message, and it's still within regulation.
No, we don't allow electronic signs or lit up signs within this.
Okay, all right. Yeah, no problems either ways, no.
Steve, do you have a strong feeling?
I don't. Between this and pet food, I'm a little, this meeting is taking a turn for the worse. To me, it just seems like an aesthetic thing. We don't like the slide-in letters are uniform and ugly. The magnetic ones, at least the picture in the staff report, doesn't even look like they're magnetic and interchangeable. I think that it's fine. Interchangeable is fine as long as they're secured in some way that's not just a slide-in. If the concern is that they blow away, then they need to be secured. That's more the point than whether or not it looks good or not.
So, show of hands, who wants to allow the magnetic sign or the magnetic letters? I think you have consensus that it would be acceptable to this group.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
you probably should have a public hearing and see
Okay.
all that first. You could
All right.
start directing that stuff.
All right. On that particular item?
Yeah, well, after
This is-
the
well,
public hearing, then you guys could make a motion to
Right, yeah,
recommend
that's
that
true.
change.
You're right, process-wise. All right, any other questions for staff?
Just came to my mind. When we have protests, the size of those signs, does it have to comply to what we're talking about? Or a protester could have a sign that is 5 by 5?
Yeah, we don't regulate signs in the public unless they're associated with a business.
Okay,
Or they're
thank you.
on private property with a commercial message.
Thank you.
We advertise for public hearing on this matter, and I'll open the public hearing now. Does anybody want to speak to this matter? Yeah. Anybody online, Michelle? Not seeing any, I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to council for a motion.
I move that we, to approve ordinance number 24-13, I believe.
Yep.
An ordinance amending the zoning regulations to include magnetic signs,
Magnetic letters.
excuse me.
So how that would read, and what I'd recommend is under 6C, it would say changeable copy signs, and then the parentheses and the for example would be crossed out and said with manually changeable individual letters or individual plastic slide-in letters are not permitted.
that your motion?
Yes.
Seconded by Counselor Davis. Any further discussion? Giuseppe?
I know it sounds silly, but why discriminate against the sliding letters? I mean, what if I have a board where I have many little nails on it and I hang letters to compose a message? Would that be legal or illegal? I mean, now we're going to count the angels on the head of a pin. I mean, if you say interchangeable letters not lit up, I can make ugly signs with magnetic letters as well. So sliding letters, it's the culture of America. When I moved here, all the McDonald's had the sliding letters, "Happy birthday, Ben," they said. So I have a problem discriminating on signs, on the record.
Motion's on the table, and, yeah,
Can I make a friendly amendment to the motion?
sure.
I would make a friendly amendment to leave the wording interchangeable letters of any nature.
Just to be clear, the ordinance reads that changeable copy signs, for example, with manually interchangeable letters are not permitted. Is that what you're saying? They should not be permitted, or they should be
It
permitted?
should be permitted if we permit the magnetic letters as well.
Okay.
So my friendly amendment is to strike the not permitted and make it may be permitted or are permitted.
Is there a second to the friendly amendment? Not hearing any, I think your friendly amendment fails for a second. With that, we'll return back to our original motion.
Your point is taken about the letters, Dave. I just wonder if there's a way to write it that shows that the letters are securely fastened, because it seems like that's the issue. I don't want to legislate too much on.
I mean, I'm basing the types of
aesthetics
those
of it.
boards that are available to purchase that, you go online to signs.com or whatever, they make these A-frame signs, and some of them are dry erase, some of them have the slide in, and then there's the ones with the magnetic letters. Maybe some new technology will come out, I don't know, but as far as the manual ones, but this is just based on what's available for people to purchase that are most commonly used for these types of signs.
Okay, as long as it's not going to cause any more trouble with the people who have to enforce this thing. I'd hate for them to be out there trying to discern between what's a slide-in letter and what's not. But it's pretty easy to tell if it's securely fastened or not. But if you think that your wording solves the problem, I'm happy to go with that.
All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign, and the matter passes unanimously. On now to communications from our Public Works Director.
So I'm the guy that gets to follow up those two agenda items. So back to resort tax. Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. I think everyone's aware that East 6th Street and Armory Road are the next two selected projects on the resort tax priority list. Both projects have road surface concerns. They lack bicycle and pedestrian amenities and have significant influence from school traffic. Council directed staff to proceed with the consultant selection process back in April of this year with the intention of proceeding with preliminary engineering on both projects and to begin public outreach to help determine which project to advance next to construction. Engineering contracts were awarded for the projects back in August. Since then, we've had, and this is for both projects, we've had 4 project newsletters, 3 public meetings, and numerous conversations with individual property owners and residents. Based on the complexity of Armory Road and the $7 million estimate for construction, it simply won't be feasible to complete that project for construction next year. Staff is currently working with Morrison Merrily on a detailed traffic trial, simulating a raised center median out on Armory Road to assist in determining which roadway design will be best served for the community. In the meantime, preliminary engineering has been completed on East 6th Street. Included in your packet tonight are several figures which provide an overview of the design options for East Sixth Street, a proposed schedule, and the current budget estimates. The city's approved transportation plan designates East Sixth Street as a local roadway, and our engineering standards for a local roadway show a 28-foot wide road, curb and gutter, and sidewalk and boulevard on both sides. Given the heavy use of East Sixth Street during the busy school drop-off and pickup, and the many design constraints along the corridor, the design team determined a standard local roadway profile would not be appropriate. Upon evaluating, rather than constructing sidewalks on both sides of East Sixth Street between Kalispell and Pine, staff feels an 8-foot shared use path on one side of the road would be a better option to allow for safer bicycle and pedestrian movement. Upon evaluating the options, it is recommended that the path be constructed on the south side of the road, which will reduce conflicts and provide for a safer crosswalk on the south side of Pine and East Sixth. Two options for roadway profiles were presented during the public meeting on October 22nd. Option one, between Spokane and Park Avenue, so for the western, roughly 2/3 of the project. Option one includes two-way vehicular traffic with 10-foot drive lanes, 2-foot curb and gutter, 6-foot boulevard, and an 8-foot shared use path on the south. This would be a total of 38 feet of total footprint from back of curb to back of shared use path. Then from Park to Pine, the one-way traffic that is currently in place would remain with a 12-foot drive lane, 2-foot curb and gutter, 6-foot boulevard, 8-foot shared use path for a total of a 30-foot total footprint. As I mentioned, these options are shown in the packet that you have, if you want to move along with me. So option one maintains the same vehicular traffic pattern that's in place today. However, the addition of the boulevard and the shared use path presents several challenges due to constraints along the corridor. Many structures are built up to or into the right-of-way, and there is considerable amount of parking that would be disrupted with this option. In addition, option one will require several mature trees to be removed from the right-of-way. Okay, that's option one. Told you there'd be decisions here. Option two, from Spokane to Columbia, so for the first two westernmost blocks, it would be the same as I presented before with two-way vehicular traffic, a 10-foot drive lanes, 2-foot curb and gutter, 6-foot boulevard, 8-foot shared use path, and that 38-foot total footprint. Option two from Columbia all the way to Pine would be one way as discussed before. Although option two will create 2 additional blocks of one-way traffic and make for a different traffic pattern, we feel that the grid system that currently exists in this area will be capable of effectively dispersing traffic and not impeding emergency response efforts. In addition, the narrower footprint on these 2 additional blocks will create far less disturbance within the right-of-way and only result in about a foot or 2 of improvement outside of what the residents currently see. The residents, I can say, who attended the last public meeting a couple of weeks ago were all in favor of option two, and the design team is recommending this option. Both options, 1 and 2, also include 5 feet of sidewalk on the west side of Pine Street, across the street from the high school, from East 5th Street to East 6th Street. We looked at options to extend that sidewalk another block south to East 7th. However, it turns out we don't have the right-of-way to do it, and there'd be significant right-of-way acquisition required. Assuming staff is authorized to finalize the design and bid this project, final engineering will begin immediately. Public meeting number 3 will be held in January to present the final design to the residents. The project will then be advertised for bid in late February with the intention of awarding the bid in early April of next year. This will allow us to have one final public meeting with the general contractor present to let the residents know what to expect during construction. The anticipated construction schedule would begin in May and extend through August, with the requirement that East 6th Street cannot be closed until school is out and would need to be reopened and substantial completion achieved prior to the start of the next school year. In terms of utilities, the vast majority of the homes have water connections off of the north-south avenues and sewer connections off of the alleys. Therefore, the only utility work required would be some storm sewer improvements and one block of cast iron water main that exists in the corridor. Lighting. As with past road reconstruction projects, staff is recommending this corridor be upgraded to include the city standard 14-foot tall, dark sky compliant decorative LED street lighting. The code establishes standards for exterior lighting to provide safe roadways for motorists, cyclists, and pedestrians while protecting the ability to view the night sky. In terms of landscaping, the Public Works Department, as with past projects, will work with Parks and Recreation and the Tree Committee to determine a tree planting plan of the boulevard as construction is complete. And the schedule for this project has been developed to ensure adequate time to restore the disturbed areas. In terms of finances, the project is slated, as I mentioned, to be paid for by the resort tax. The estimated cost for option one, including professional fees, street lighting, utility relocation, and construction, is $2.87 million, and the total estimated cost for option two is about $200,000 less at $2.67 million. Based on the guidance and direction received to date from council, the Resort Tax Committee, and the public outreach that has been conducted, staff respectfully requests that council approve the conceptual design and authorize staff to proceed with the final design of option two for construction in 2025.
Any questions for Craig on his staff report? Dave, just have
Oh,
to
sorry.
let
Go
them go
ahead.
first. Go ahead.
Just a couple. So if the proposed footprint is 30 feet wide, what is the current footprint?
Current footprint's about 28 feet from, I should also mention, Brandon Tice and Zach Mason are here as part of the design team, and there are a number of residents if there are specific questions. But I believe it's approximately 28 feet from Spokane to Park, the current two-way section from edge of pavement to edge of pavement.
Okay. And just curious, how come we opted for a shared use path, which is different from everything else in that neighborhood?
Just honestly, based on the amount of school traffic that occurs, we wanted to create a two-way bicycle and pedestrian way, and you don't achieve that through 5-foot sidewalks on either side.
Fair enough.
Not to mention, when you put sidewalks on either side, you've got 5 foot of boulevard on both sides. So as opposed to the 6-foot boulevard on one side, you now wind up with 10 feet of boulevards on both sides.
Okay. And you feel the one-way design adequately addresses our circulation concerns with the school?
Yeah, I think it does. It's not, we don't take the decision lightly to switch roads from two-way to one-way, but I did consult with Cole and Bridger. Typically, the majority of their response activities come from the west, and so they weren't very concerned about it. I feel that the one-way eastbound is going to get students to school, and then the traffic will redisperse to get away from school.
And Frank's favorite topic, the lighting. I'm not going to beat this dead horse, but it
You say dead horse?
no, I'm not going to beat this dead horse. But there's no other roads in that entire area that have lighting, right? This would be the only one?
No, there's considerable lighting
Is
in
there?
that area. Yeah,
Like going up and down the
Columbia,
avenues?
Summers,
Those all have streetlights?
Pine.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, there really won't be too many lights to add as part of this project because the north-south streets are already lit, with the exception of Park, I believe.
And will this be addressing the steeper grade as you come into 6th Street over there by the National Parks building?
We haven't gotten to that phase of design yet, but yeah, the road grading will come with the final design.
Happy?
Yes. Craig, the design team recommends option 2,
Correct.
correct?
Yes.
The city staff, Public Works, is asking to approve preferentially option 2, correct?
Correct.
all the neighbors, all the letters I've read prefer option 2. And option 2 is $200,000 less expensive. Am I correct?
That's all correct.
Okay, so why are you presenting option 1? What's the meaning, what's the benefit that we would obtain if we decided to go for option 1?
So typically what we do is have a series of public meetings. Once council authorizes staff to proceed with the design of a project, we have a number of public meetings. And we like to present the public with more than one option. There could have been a number of residents on that street that say, no way, I every day leave and I go west and I don't want to go east. We didn't hear that, and so typically what staff does is present council with a summary of what was presented to the public and a recommendation. So,
Thank you.
Steve? Actually, I'm going to short circuit it, and I wasn't going to ask about lighting. I was actually going to say that given that part of the city and given what I know about the lighting that's already there, it wouldn't offend my sensibilities at all. And it's a safe route to schools. And given what we've seen in the early mornings until this weekend, we need those lights. So anyway, I just thought I'd change my,
you
change my
never
course.
cease to amaze me, Frank.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm actually glad to hear that. All right, thank you. Any other questions for Craig? Not seeing any. I'd entertain a motion. I think he would.
I'll move to direct the Director of Public Works to proceed with option 2 and the contract for, what do you need approved?
For final design and bidding.
For final design and bidding of option 2.
Motion seconded by Councilor Norton. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. The matter passes unanimously. Thanks, Craig. And next.
Okay. No lighting in this one. So the city was awarded a grant from the Federal Railroad Authority for a railroad crossing elimination grant. The RCE planning grant will provide funding for a document examining the existing crossings in Whitefish and propose projects to improve safety. Some of the specific projects that would be examined include a possible grade-separated crossing east of the existing viaduct and crossing improvements to State Park Road and Birch Point Drive. In accordance with the City of Whitefish consultant selection policy, the Public Works Department advertised for proposals from qualified consulting engineering firms. And council appointed myself and Karen Hilding to serve on the rating panel, as well as myself, Karen, and Rebecca Norton, Councilor Norton, to serve on the selection panel for this RFP. Proposals were received from 2 firms, KLJ and HDR, and the interview panel convened 2 weeks ago on October 21st. Upon completion of the interviews, it was the unanimous opinion of the selection committee that a contract be awarded to HDR. While both consultants submitted impressive proposals, HDR demonstrated more experience with railroad crossing elimination projects and a higher likelihood of obtaining future construction grant funds. The current budget for this plan is $500,000, which will be funded by a $400,000 grant, $75,000 in contribution from BNSF, and a $25,000 city contribution. Based on the process that was followed, it's the recommendation of Public Works that a contract be awarded to HDR to complete the railroad crossing elimination plan, and the city manager be authorized to execute the contract.
Any questions for Craig on his staff report? Not seeing any. Rebecca? I think Giuseppe wanted to. Okay, go right ahead.
I can remember. I moved to award the contract to HDR for the railroad crossing study and to have our city manager implement it. That doesn't sound right.
Authorized to execute.
Authorize it. Okay, thank you.
I'll second it.
And I'd like to just say one thing. Both firms were excellent. I mean, we are so fortunate to have such amazing partners in building our town. and it was a hard decision, but they were both did an excellent job. So, and what this will do is get us some grant money later on so we can improve the safety at our railroad crossings. And particularly the one out by the dog park is what a lot of people are looking at too, but there were, I think, 4 or 5 that we were looking at, Craig?
Yeah,
Yep.
four in total.
But there's quite a bit of federal money that we'll be able to get if we can get this project done, so.
Any other comments? Giuseppe?
Yeah, I'd like to thank BNSF for their generosity and $75,000. And also, we'll see later, it looks like they're working with us. So for now, I want to thank them for the $75,000.
Any other comments from council? We've got have we got a motion? We got a motion, okay. All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign, and that matter passes unanimously as well. Next, we have communications from our city attorney, Angie.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. On the, I guess, tenor of BNS working with us for once. So back in 2005, which I had been an attorney for 4 years, so this was not my deal, but that also makes me feel ancient. The city and BNSF entered into a license for bicycle pedestrian walkway for the path that's known as the BNSF Loop Trail. And the license had a 25-year term and expired on May 19th, 2030. So fast forward, in early January of 2018, the city approved a planned unit development and preliminary plat for the project that was formerly known as 95 Caro, which is located along the Whitefish River. And the project was anticipated to be a mixed-use development with a variety of uses, including residential, lodging, professional offices, etc. One of the conditions required the developer to install a bicycle and pedestrian trail the entire length of the river, connecting to Caro Avenue, as depicted in the site plan. However, the site plan submitted by the developer, which is in your packet, also proposed a bridge over the Whitefish River connecting the property to BNSF property and a bicycle pedestrian trail connecting the BNSF loop. So the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation requires a permanent easement to construct a bridge over navigable waters. They also require that a public entity, not a private developer, hold the easement, which is very common, I think, with DNRC, as you'll see with most of our trails for the Whitefish Trail. We were informed that it's DNRC's longstanding policy that a permanent easement over or fee ownership of the property located on either side of the bridge be secured before it will even accept an application for a bridge easement. And their reasoning at that point was it cannot legally facilitate a trespass in the event that our license for some reason with BNSF would not be renewed. Craig and Maria did speak to BNSF, and as kind of their standard, they don't like to give up their land. They were unwilling to grant us a permanent easement or fee ownership of the property on which the bridge abutment and trail connection was proposed. However, several months of working with DNRC staff, thank you, Craig. Craig was a bulldog on this, and he was great with his follow-up, and I say that in the kindest way possible. They actually agreed to deviate from their standard procedure. Their agreement was conditioned that the license agreement between the city and BNSF reflect DNRC's standard procedure, make it clear that DNRC was only deviating from the procedure due to extraordinary circumstances, that a permanent easement be recorded on the developer's landing side of the bridge, that the license between BNSF and the city be extended for an additional 25 years, and that certain language be inserted in the bridge easement documenting, including that DNRC be given a copy of any subsequent amendments, and that the city would be responsible for removing the bridge if its license was not renewed or terminates for some reason. We presented DNRC's proposal to BNSF. They were wonderful. They got back to us within 2 weeks and said, yes, absolutely, we can accommodate that. So in collaboration with staff, the supplemental agreement, which is attached as Exhibit B, was drafted, which incorporates BNSF's and DNRC's agreements, and actually extends the license for an additional 25 years. So if approved by council, the city can actually move forward with submitting an application to DNRC for the permanent bridge easement. Financial impacts, so the last payment to BNSF for the license was $6,641 and change for May 20th, 2024 to May 19th, 2025. The new proposed base rent is an increase. It's close to $15,000 and change, again, payable annually in advance, and it's subject to a minimal escalation of 3%. That said, again, this was originally negotiated back in almost 20 years ago. So it is an increase. I don't know that it's a substantial increase given what we're actually getting, which is a trail connection that I think we need, and a bridge that will serve Casey's development and the community as a whole. So staff does respectfully request that the city approve the supplemental agreement, authorize Dina to execute the same, and authorize staff to submit an application for a bridge easement to DNRC. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Steve?
Does this new lease agreement with BNSF include the piece that connects the rail yards, whatever the development's called now? Does it connect underneath the trestle over to the bridge?
Yeah, we actually got that with the last lease amendment, so that's in place.
Okay, so that's all done.
Yeah,
That's
this
included in
amendment
this.
does include about a 40 or 50-foot piece on Miles Avenue that will connect the sidewalk along Miles Avenue to the BNSF Loop Trail. But the railroad trestle, that section on the north side of Whitefish Yards was approved when they did the Baker Avenue underpass lease amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca?
Yeah, do we have a lot of leases with BNSF then? I didn't realize we had to pay them to use their property, but I guess that makes sense that we would. I don't think it's an unreasonable amount for what we're getting.
No, we have licenses. BNSF traditionally does not grant permanent easements or fee ownership of their land. So what they do is they grant a land license. But yeah, we do. And yeah, we do pay. And again, I mean, I know it seems like kind of a big jump, but again, the initial base rent was negotiated back in 2005. So
Yeah.
I didn't think it was inordinate.
No, it's actually amazing that it worked out. Good job, you guys. Yeah.
Any other questions for Angie? Sure.
I would move to approve the settlement agreement between BNSF Railway and the City of Whitefish for the BNSF Loop Trail and authorize staff to submit an application for a bridge easement to DNRC with regards to the Whitefish Yards project.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Calentagliano. Any further discussion on this matter?
The saga continues. Hopefully we get to a resolution someday.
Giuseppe?
This was my second part of my thank you to BNSF. I didn't want to spoil Angie's presentation. I also want to thank Casey and his team for working, uniting, and working with Craig to get to this point. Mr. Warren Buffett is sitting on $350 billion cash right now. It doesn't need that money, but I think they're very business savvy, and this probably it's a win-win.
Any further comments? All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign, and the matter passes unanimously. Next up are communications from our city manager, Dana.
Good evening again. In the packet, you have my manager's report. I'll just bring your attention to a couple items. One is there is a draft letter of support for the Greater Valley Health Center. They're in the process of applying for continued funding from the Health Resources and Services Administration as a qualified health center. And so unless you have any concerns, I do intend to submit that to Mary tomorrow. The deadline is November 6th for them. City Hall will be closed November 11th for Veterans Day. and get out to vote. I'm going to turn over to Bridger just to give you guys a little update about our voting polling places and what security will be provided so that any concerns can be handled. So, Bridger.
Yes, good evening. I've just received quite a few emails or calls reference the security of our 3 polling places. And just to give everybody a heads up that Flathead County Posse will be manning all polling places in the Flathead Valley. We're working with our team in our 3 locations, and our officers will be doing extra patrols and those type of things around the polling places to ensure that we have a safe and following the rules polling in Whitefish.
Any questions for Bridger? Not seeing any. Any questions for Dana on her report? Not seeing any. Anything else? Like it. Next up, communications from mayor and city councilors. Mayor is excused this evening, so he won't have any comments. Rebecca?
Just to get out and vote. It's a pretty important election. And for people that don't know, you can still register and vote on the same day tomorrow, but you have to go down to Kalispell, to the election department to do it. If your registration is no longer, what is that term? It's like when you're put on hold because you haven't voted in the last general, you can still go to the polling place that's assigned to you as long as you bring proof of a photo ID and some kind of proof like a utility bill or a bank statement, and they will let you vote. But hopefully we'll have a really great turnout. Usually we do with general elections. I think nationally it will be a really interesting race. So thank you.
Ben? Giuseppe?
Very quickly, in the ballot, which affects directly our municipality, there is an item about a group of people tasked to review our city government. There are other items like state representatives, but in the municipality, that's the item that affects us. So pay attention, read the guide, and vote. Thank you.
Steve?
Nothing further other than I just do encourage, if you haven't voted already, I know a lot of people already have, to get out and vote, and also consider being part of your local government and serve on one of our boards.
Sure.
If anybody knows how big my dog is, you're probably wondering if I made this recommendation to not have pet food tax because of Rosie, but actually it was brought up about 6 years ago by the person that owns Tail Waggers. And so finally I got this done. All right.
Had you made the recommendation because of Rosie, that would have been a conflict of interest, so you couldn't have voted.
All I can say is thanks to all of you for all that you've done this month and will be doing. What the rest of the year, are we going to entertain whether or not we're going to have our second meeting in December, and when will we consider that?
I think we were planning to put that on the next agenda.
Okay, great.
So that it's advertised.
That's what I wanted
And then
to
it
say.
helps us kind of have more of an idea of what we might have that needs to go on that agenda and if there's a necessary item or not. So, yep.
Just want to make sure. Thanks so much.
Yep, thank you.
And with that, I think we're adjourned.